Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today I'm joined by the wonderful Hillary White as we discuss Sanjuro. This is a pretty well-known Kurosawa samurai film, and it's pretty unique as it actually serves as a sequel to his previous film, following this character as he gets involved in a new conflict. This is a film that we had a lot of fun going over, to be honest. It is in many ways a more simplistic Kurosawa film, but in that we were able to really dissect the director, his intentions with the art he creates, and debate if this is one of his stronger or weaker entries in his filmography. I'm really excited for you to listen to this. Originally, this was going to be our Patreon bonus episode for the month, but I thought it was so fun, I've upped it to just being a normal release. Don't worry, a Patreon bonus episode will be coming soon, but for now, let's enjoy a full episode on Kurosawa's Sanjuro. Okay, Hillary, thank you so much for joining me today to finally talk about some Kurosawa, our first ever Kurosawa film on the podcast, Sanjuro, 1962, the sequel to Yojimbo from the year before. I'm very interested in talking about this film. I kind of went in with no expectations. And it was an interesting choice, I think, from my perspective. But first, I'd love to hear from you, Hillary. What is your, I don't know, what is your history with Kurosawa? Are you like a Kurosawa fan? Have you seen a lot of his work? And then what are your opening thoughts on Sanjuro?
I've seen Kurosawa films before, and I'm pretty sure that the first one I saw was in film school. A pretty standard answer. They showed us Rashomon, and of course, Rashomon is great. I think it's a great film to start with, and I've seen other films of his over the years. I haven't seen all of them, and I wouldn't describe myself as a mega fan or anything like that. There's still a lot of his work that I haven't explored yet, and I had not seen this one, so I went into it blind as well. I had seen Yojimbo, but it was a long time ago, so I had to sit down and watch that one again. And my opening thoughts about this one is it's definitely it's not my favorite of Kurosawa's work, but there's things about it that are very intriguing and interesting. I think just I'm sure the conversation we're going to have will probably cover some unexpected stuff. But I think what made me struggle to engage with it, and I had the same experience with the Yojimbo as well. I thought I remember not engaging with the Yojimbo very much, and then I watched it again, and I thought, oh wow, that has not changed. I'm still having I can't really meet this film halfway. Is because it has certain themes and it seems like it's imparting certain messages, but there's a ton of contradictions going on throughout the movie where you think, oh, like that this is how things should work unless it's this, or I don't know. We'll get into it. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, especially because if this is our first Kurosawa episode, this is a sequel, so it's even a stranger decision to do a follow up rather than an original film or the first film of I don't know, a pair of films.
No, for sure. Yojimbo, I similar to you, saw it years ago, which is why I didn't pick that one. I was like, I haven't seen Sanjuro. Let's just jump into the sequel, I guess. Because I was told it was like my understanding that you can kind of jump into this without seeing the first one, which I would say I overall agree with for the most part. We have a weird phenomenon on this podcast where we will pick a director. Specifically, normally Jack is here for this, where we will pick a really great director, and we'll kind of randomly pick one of his films. And I think sometimes it's because I tend to pick kind of a less popular film, but we'll watch a movie and it'll be like, oh, this director is great. We have a ton of love and respect for this director. And I have a lot of love and respect for Kurosawa. I'm not necessarily a stan, very similar. Like, he's not Ozu for me. I love and worship Ozu. Kurosawa's like has some really great films. But my heart is not necessarily with this director. But we'll watch one of their films and it'll be like, well, we love the director, but maybe this film wasn't the best showcase of their abilities. Doesn't always happen, but I'd say like 9 out of 10 times. Even sometimes we'll pick a film that like is universally adored and loved, like we did with God and Monsters, and we'll watch it and we'll be like horrified by what we watched. This is not a terrible film. This is not a bad film, I would say even.
No.
I would just say out of Kurosawa's filmography, especially even just hyper focusing on like this period of his career and his work in the samurai genre. And I will say, if anyone's not seen his like dramatic works, I think High and Low came out a year after this. Some of his earlier dramatic works are fantastic. I would say even in like that specific lens though, Sanjuro didn't do much for me. And I think it's going to be very similar actually for maybe some of your issues. I agree. I like, again, Yojimbo, I thought was fine when I watched it. I thought it was slightly clever. Sanjuro for me was even like a step down though from that film. There's a lot here, and we'll get into the conversation. We'll get into what this means in like the samurai genre and stuff. And you know, again, it's not terrible, but there's a lot here about like how do you respond to conflict? Should you use a sword? Should you use your intelligence? What is the pathway when you're met with like an opposing enemy, or you're met with corruption, or you're met with betrayal? And there's a consistent conversation in this film that's like, you should not use your sword, you should be thoughtful, you shouldn't just strike. Which in Yojimbo there are samurai battles, but this main character uses his wits to get out of the situation and kind of control the situation socially. So it's like, that makes total sense. For me, the film didn't necessarily then deliver on that promise of like, this is our narrative, this is our purpose. And it does kind of just boil down to like a very competent, but also like a pretty basic samurai action film for me, where I was like, I don't necessarily think the message that you've been telling me about is the one you're actually showing me or developing in that narrative. To where I was a little bit confused about like, what is this film really doing, or what is this film even really trying to say? Definitely good elements here. Like, again, we will get into the good stuff too, but I was definitely left a little bit disappointed and cold from the experience. But you know, sad. Sorry, Kurosawa, I picked a bad one.
I honestly can't say whether I think this is my least favorite or anything of his. I actually had the opposite experience of you watching Yojimbo again. Yojimbo's just darker, but it's very important at the same time because it sets up this very obvious template for all these westerns that came later. And I'm sure that's been discussed to death. I'm not bringing anything new to the table by bringing this up, but it's fun to go back and revisit Yojimbo and realize, oh, there's that there, and I've seen that 100 times, and this and this and that, and I've heard that 100 times. And it's bloodier, it's darker, and I think that our main character definitely has more. There is something a little bit more nefarious about his intentions, and he's a lot more demanding of money. So this second one, he does still ask for money and food, but it's definitely tamped down a lot more. And at one point, I wrote down a note saying something like, is he trying to atone for his actions in the first one? But that's never really made clear. I think this is what I kind of boiled it down to, is there's a message that's being imparted to us about, you should be a sword that stays in its sheath, right? The best sword is kept in its sheath. But the message that is being sent is, unless you are Toshiro Mehune, and we talked about this off mic, just to let people know, we wanted to make sure we pronounced his name correctly. So it's Toshiro Mehune. But he's just so cool that it's like, well, we have to show him killing people. And so there's a lot of people getting killed. And that's where some of the contradictions come in, where it's very much like, you shouldn't be violent unless you're this character, and he can be violent, and it's not even his fault. It's because of the actions of other people around him being idiots. So everyone had to die. But while watching it, I'm thinking, no, not really. I don't think you had to kill everyone in this room. Like, some people were trying to run away, etc. So there's a lot going on, and I'm sure that you may know about this already, that Yojimbo was such a success that they rewrote it so it could suit, like, they slotted his character into a story where maybe he didn't fit. And I wonder how much of that influences what we're seeing here.
I know they also, because the popularity of the first film, wrote him specifically being more of like an anti-hero, as you mentioned. He's definitely like, there's a conviction within him where he asks for money, and then he's like, okay, I got my money, I did my thing, I'm gonna leave. But he stops himself and he's like, no, I have to help you guys, especially because the team he finds himself on are like these really quiet, dumb young men. In Japan and in Japanese film, literally from the 1920s to the 2020s. You see so much about age gaps and about like different generations, and it's obviously like a lot of the older generation looking down on the younger generation. He's like, no, I have to help you guys. You're lost. Like I will lead you guys to victory and to justice. So there is like this conviction within him where like he all the roughness of that first film really gets smoothed down tremendously to where he is. I mean, I even venture to be like, is he really even an anti-hero? He's kind of just a hero in this film. But it is very funny to me that, like, very light spoilers, with the quote that you mentioned about the sword, the best sword is the one that stays in its sheath. It's very funny that like the final sequence is a sword fight where he goes like, I'm not going to fight you. It's not worth it. You know, we don't need to fight. And the other guy's like, no, I want to fight. And he's like, okay. And they just kills him. It's like, it's pretty hilarious how it just like, again, throws it away, mainly because Mifune Toshiro absolutely is a badass. I mean, I think his pairing with Kurosawa typically is like one of just the iconic, legendary, great partnerships between an actor and a director. He is still great here. He still has just like such a charisma. He just commands the room. I do think some of the writing is like, because they're just smoothing out the roughness of his edges, it is kind of like he's just perfect. He just is like the guy who is smarter than everyone. Every plan he
Yeah.
has works. He like in every action sequence he's going to move a little bit quicker than the other guy.
Hmm.
As we mentioned with morality, there are people who criticize him for like, hey, you don't need to show this much violence. At the same time, he like always saves the day with violence. Like it's never really questioned with like a lot of like, oh, you went too far and then that caused an issue for other people. He is like very perfect in that lead action role, which again, the performance is great. Maybe some of that writing it's I guess it's hard to say because it's not like it's bad. You're not watching this and you're like, oh my god, this is so stupid. It's just like it kind of it has the intention seemingly of being a little bit more elevated, and consistently with that writing it just takes a step back to where you're watching this and it's like, it's a fun, like, for samurai, if you just wanted to throw on like at 3 a.m. The TV and it had a samurai movie on and you're like, well, this is fun to get into, it's not going to leave much of an impact but it's like fun, this fills that role fine. It's bizarre because it feels like even just from that first film, much less Kurosawa's entire filmography, like it really feels like it's trying to be more at times, but it just keeps pulling itself back. It's very like weird actually when you're watching it.
Yep. Yeah, that whiplash you're describing is definitely there, and some of the stuff I wrote down because you were talking about Mihune's character. At one point, I wrote down. I said it's like he's a psychic vagrant, an angry babysitter, and he's playing 40 chess for booze. It's a really strange combination of actions, but what's holding it together is Mihune's performance. And like you said earlier, that I kept thinking the same word, that charisma. He's interested when he's asleep. He's interested when he's tired or not doing anything or just staring. It's just he's one of those actors that's always interesting to watch. So I think just on his performance alone, you can get very, very far and kind of be in the pocket of whatever they're trying to do here. And but when you actually sit down and think about it, I was thinking, okay, so if this was modern times and they were trying to translate this to now, it would be like some young guys who are really, really heated in an alley or something like that saying, okay, we're in this gang and there's a rival gang and this person's corrupt, like let's go kill them. And then this guy shows up from the neighboring alley because he's just sleeping there in sweats with like a gun in his like a gun in his sweatpants band, and he probably reeks of booze and he's like, I'm taking over from here, and he takes over and everything just magically works. Like, it's a really hard sell, but somehow in Sanjuro it works. And I think like that's just as confounding what doesn't work. Oh, okay. Yeah. What do you think about that?
No, I mean I fully agree. It's so funny. Like even just trying to think about like modern times, like how like it's like if John Wick like went over and was like, I'm gonna help this random gang. Like it's so weird. But again, yeah, he's so casual. It's not like John Wick, to be clear, tone wise. He is just like very laid back, very yawny, very just kind of like sleepwalking through with like charisma. To be clear, not like he's just like a lazy guy. It's kind of like hard. I guess it's very unique. I have like a tone, but I guess that's the joy of Mihune. Like that is just like what this guy brings. Um, I think it is effective, as you mentioned. Like it is fun to watch. It's a weird pairing, and again, like it consistently also played for laughs with the younger guys around him, and how just incompetent sometimes there are until the very end, where they're like, "Wait a minute, we should actually like just follow the plan." And that's like the big plot point is how they just follow the plan and it works out for them. And in Mihune, like there's so many key scenes, for example, in that conclusion where like he's literally tied up. He does not like he's tied up, he's surrounded, and he still just kind of finds a way out of it. I guess there's a little bit of like a Han Solo element to him. It's
Mm.
very yeah, I don't know. I think it is an effective, I guess, like lead character. It's fun to watch. I'll give it that absolutely. And he has just such a charisma. That's also like pretty unique for the samurai genre. I feel like a lot of the times, and obviously like culturally and stuff, like this is seen as a very very serious and weighted topic and time and responsibility and the weight of violence. And there are some things here where like especially at the end, he's very cold as he kills this guy, and he's like, no, this was not like a celebration, this was not a good thing, like we did not have to have this violence today. It is a character that I think in a lot of worse hands would probably upset the balance of like this trying to be fun and trying to be serious. I think Kurosawa walks that line very well. um yeah, no, but I agree. I think he is pretty effective here overall.
Yeah, he has that magic. It's interesting that you compared him to John Wick because it is different tonally. These are very different films from each other, but I have that connection to it as well. Um, I view John Wick as a samurai story. That's just my own thing I've come up with my own, and that's why I'm able to kind of buy into how grandiose those films are. Uh, it's just like once upon a time there was this samurai who's so awesome and can do everything because there are similarities. When John Wick goes around with a gun, he never misses. He's always a little quicker, like you said. And Wahune's samurai character, who is nameless, he just takes on different names in these two films. He's also the same, but he is with a sword. And the other connection between these two figures is that before John Wick was made, I'm pretty sure, let me just make sure that this is the case and I have my years correct. So let's see. Okay, so maybe it was a year later, but Keanu Reeves narrated a documentary about Mehune's life called Mehune the Last Samurai, and it came out in 2015. And I think this was John Wick 2014.
Yeah, 2014.
Okay, yeah, it's a really good documentary. So if
Wow, that
it's
connection
obvious,
is, I didn't
it's
know that.
crazy.
That's like, wow.
Subconsciously, you knew. You just knew. I think, and I thought
Did he
that's so
pronounce the name
crazy.
right?
I was watching the trailer to make sure. I thought, man, I'm sure that they probably told Reeves to pronounce the name correctly. But I was telling Carson before we started that there's all these interviews with Steven Spielberg in the trailer, and he keeps mispronouncing Mihune's name, and I thought that was just really funny because no one wants to correct Steven Spielberg, maybe. So I would recommend that as well if you want to see the John Wick Mehune connection, but I don't think John Wick is discussed. It's just apparent that Reeves is aware of Mehune and the samurai film, and they probably took a little bit of that into John Wick. So
Wow.
you're not alone on that one.
No,
You caught onto
it's
something.
crazy. That's just, I literally had no idea. That's such a reveal to me. But I guess yeah, the more you think about it, like again, I guess the projects and the characters tone wise very different. This guy just kind of is wandering around. John Wick is very revenge fueled, but like I do think there's probably a deeper connection if I ever watched John Wick more recently under that lens. Huh, that's fascinating. I'll have to check out that documentary also. I will also say, as far as influences and this film influencing other movies, you do have the iconic ending bloodshed moment of the blood splattering. I love the
Mm.
fact that, very unique for the genre, shocked the people on set. Apparently, this is legend so much that they thought he actually got cut open and it was actually a bleeding, because it's like that's not what this special effect looks like. I can only really compare it to like some of the stuff in Kill Bill. It really is like over the top, but in a way that I think works tremendously. I really, even though it doesn't make sense with the whole story of the film and what we're saying about violence, this one moment of grandiose violence at the end where it's just an explosion of blood out of this guy's chest really did work for me. But I like, you will be watching older films, especially older Asian cinema, and you can just look and be like, oh, there's Tarantino, he got that. And yeah,
Yep,
he
he
definitely got
cribbed
this.
everything. Yeah. It's I mean, I know I'm late to the party and I don't want to make it sound like I am a Tarantino apologist or a super fan, or just didn't get it, but it is interesting. The more older films I watch, the more I realize, did he come up with anything on his own? It's just it's one of those realizations where it's like, yeah, I know, but I didn't know how far it went. You know what I mean? um but with ending of this one, I think it is more shocking because all the swordplay you see happening in Sanjuro is very much, it's pretty clean. There's some times where I'm pretty sure like Mihune isn't hitting anybody, but you're in this contract with the film where it's like, okay, he can't actually hit people with a sword. It can't be perfect every time they shoot. And so they're just going to fall down and they're going to die. Yojimbo has a lot more of that. Revisiting that, I forgot about that. There was some sword fights in there where there were those explosions of blood. They would, rig somebody and they would like fall against the wall and there'd be a geyser of blood that shoots upward or something that's just not humanly possible. So that's part of why Yojimbo was darker. I mean, even the beginning, I'd forgotten that there was a puppy that runs by with a human hand in its mouth, which I thought, that's really disturbing, but also cute. Like, what? And Sanjuro really holds back on that. And that last scene is really shocking. I remember kind of jumping back a little bit and thinking like, oh, this is Yojimbo again. But then what does that suggest, or what is that saying if you're watching these films back to back? Is he returning to who he was, or is this just a weird exception? It's not clear, and I think maybe one of the problems that you and I are having is there isn't really a character arc. You're saying, you have Mehune's character is just perfect throughout. Every single idea he comes up with is brilliant. He's always able to talk his way out of things, even when he does things where I've thought, you could just be murdered right now, but he's not going to be murdered because he's the hero of the film. And the young men he's helping don't really develop either. They don't even really fully get it at the end. Where they say like, we're going to follow you and stuff, and he has to eventually say, if you follow me, I'm going to kill you, because you're not getting it. And so maybe there's bits of that. No one really changes, and it's somewhat luck. I don't know.
I mean, I guess it is like the biggest thing you can say is it's this grumpy old guy, like just realizing that like this modern society and these younger generations don't get it. They won't get it. They'll continue to make these mistakes. I mean, from the guys he's helping to the guy at the end where he's like, we don't need this violence, but he's so persistent on like, no, we need this violence. Maybe it's just him becoming dejected with the world. Like that's the only thing I can really see there. It does have a lot of like the plot conventions of something that is more episodic than something that is like a fully fledged film. I was kind of shocked actually that I didn't see anywhere that there was interest in like making a third one of these. That's really what it feels like. Is it feels like this is like, okay, now we're going to transition from that first film that tried to be its own thing to something that is more, he strolls in, he has this action, like he finds himself in this situation, he gets out of it, and then he moves on to the next one. As far as character arcs, really, I would just say it's him becoming like more and more frustrated with people who just don't understand like the weight of what they're doing, which also comes from age and such. But yeah, I was pretty like surprised. It feels very like when you take an original film and typically, and maybe this is just modern sensibilities, and you kind of rework it to be like more pleasurable for the audience, a little bit safer in a lot of ways, you don't really make any big swings or such, that is, setting itself up for a runway. Normally, if it's a sequel where it's just trying to continue this character, you would give it some personal arc or some personal attachment. I mean, look at John Wick, for example, with how
Hmm.
each of those films, especially once you get through, well, actually, I guess it's kind of both what I'm saying. In chapter 2 and 3, it is a little bit more that episodic, but then chapter 4, which is meant to be that conclusion and that, sequel, gives them that very clear, emotional, powerful arc. The film does not necessarily take that route, to where it's like, his wife or someone connected to him in trouble. It is just kind of another situation he finds himself in. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I guess when it comes to like feeling substantial, that would probably be one of the bigger issues with it for me.
Hmm. There are things in Mihuni's performance that imply there may be more, but it's all through his acting. It's not through dialogue or maybe anything story related. And I think a lot of that comes out with how he relates to the women, the two hostages, it's the counselor, right? I'm trying to, yeah, I'm really sorry. It got really complicated. I did watch this film twice to make sure I fully understood what was going on. But when they rescue the wife and the daughter, the way he behaves around them and takes in their ideas, even though he's sometimes very insulting toward them, it does imply that he does respect them in some strange way. And it did make me wonder, where did this guy come from? How did he end up being the way he is? All that kind of thing, all those kind of circumstances that create someone like that. Because obviously, and it is something that happens to anybody. You meet someone at a certain age and you might be confounded by the way they are. That's not an accident. They became the way they are because of something, and maybe you don't know what that is. Uh, there are there are similarities between this and Seven Samurai. I thought about that while watching Yojimbo in this one, because it is about a samurai intervening and being paid in order to protect a town or a small cohort of people. And the messages at the end of this one and Seven Samurai are very similar, which is the people who hired me don't get it. They aren't going to get it. That seems to be the universal outcome that viewers see from those films. Like, I'm obviously going to have to continue on my own. I don't fit into society. The code I follow or whatever I'm offering is not of much use anymore. And that's very universal. I mean, it is being told through Japanese storytelling and through Japanese history, and particularly, the figure of the samurai. But I kept thinking, this is happening all the time. There were these wars, a series of wars that led to the biggest ordered mass hanging in the United States. Some people may have heard about this. It's definitely more of a local thing where I am. We discussed this a lot. So it basically started with some young men in one of the Sioux tribes who wanted to attack and take revenge for what white settlers were doing to their tribes. And the older generation said, that's not very wise. You should not do that. But then they did that, and it escalated and spun out and created more conflicts and more wars. And it did end up with a lot of people being executed. It was supposed to be 300 Native American men who were going to be hanged, and it got talked down to 30 something. And this is still something that we're reckoning with in the area and trying to, you know, integrate more into history, like actually teaching it in schools, because I definitely didn't know about this until I was an adult. But while watching Sanjuro, I just kept thinking about that there's people who are young and they're rash and they have such great intentions and like really strong convictions about things, and they want to run out there and they want to change things and usually want to use violence and that sort of thing. And that's not always the smartest way to go about things. It would have been interesting if this was a film with a samurai that was played by, say, um, what's his name? I actually wrote down his name. He's not used very much. Takashi Shimura, who plays the head samurai in Seven Samurai. He's also Nikuru. Wonderful actor, very underutilized in Sanjuro. It was kind of crazy how little he was in this. But if it was a wiser samurai who said, like, hey, you don't have to fight. we can use diplomacy, we can outsmart these people. But that seems to be kind of supplanted by the wife character, and she is played by, it's like Takako Iri. Once again, I don't speak Japanese, so if I pronounce that incorrectly, I apologize. But her idea and the daughter's idea of let's just send flowers down the stream, because he's like, well, I'm going to burn down the house. And I thought that is like the most male thing I've ever heard. Like, what will be a signal for us to attack? I'm just going to burn down everything. And the flowers actually work. There's problems, but there it does kind of illustrate that there's different ways to maybe resolve issues or communicate, or I don't know, just tackle problem solving. But eventually it just kind of gets down to people getting slashed with swords, harikiri, seppuku. I know I don't think those terms are interchangeable, but basically suicide out of honor, all this stuff, and then the fight at the end where it's just more sword stuff, and that he walks off, at the end. And I do like his theme music. I don't know, the theme music is the same at the end of both films, and there was just something about him walking away and then his theme music coming up. It just made me laugh. Where he's just like, "I'm fucking done with all of you." Bum 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 bum. The end. And no one really learned anything, unfortunately.
And I do think like one thing when you look at Kurosawa's filmography, because asking like, okay, then what is his purpose of making this film or telling these narratives? Especially because if you look through Seven Samurai and you look through a lot of his work, he kind of repeats a lot of these themes. I think a lot of people don't understand how politically charged Kurosawa was, especially with like World War II and how Japan handled itself and the violence of Japan. Very critical of a lot of those choices. I just this week watched one of his earlier dramas. I think it's like Regrets from Our Youth or something like that. And it's all about, specifically in Kyoto, they had a student protests, and then what are the aftermaths of that, like that carries throughout their entire lives, and the consequences of standing for what you believe in. I do think that probably, and this is something where just I'm not a scholar on this, and I'm not someone who obviously lived in Japan at the time to fully understand the social context, but coming out of World War II, pretty big like national defeat, a lot of frustration, having this anger, I guess I would say, or frustration, at how younger generations deal with conflict, and how maybe immature I think Kurosawa sees some of that work, and some of that response. I do think that probably would be the deepest informing factor of what he's trying to say with these projects, because he really does repeat this over and over and over again. And obviously drawing from the past, it would make sense to use this tale of samurai, to say something more about the future or about the present. And he also, I think, like 3 or 4 years before this, made I Live in Fear, which is all about the nuclear bombs. Fantastic film. Highly, highly recommend that, everyone, if you've not seen that from Kurosawa. Very underrated. But I would probably point to, like, if I had to make a claim or make an argument, there's probably some of that within this worldview. And that is why at the end, like, I'm sure at the time it is frustrating, as probably politics for a lot of people now feel frustrating, seeing people make these choices that you disagree with, that maybe you even see as being evil or being corrupt, and just being like, I can't stop this. I can't change your mind. And it's just frustrating seeing you make these decisions that, with a little bit more, like, if you take a step back and have a little bit more perspective, it's not going to end well for anyone.
Yeah,
I'm
everyone
that's
loses.
there. Yeah. Even he, like, he does walk out of this unscathed, obviously. But he's not happy that he had to engage in that final bit of conflict or bloodshed. Like, he certainly, is not thrilled at the end of this. Everyone, in his opinion, even those like the young people around him, are pretty like pumped up and jazzed with how it goes. He has that perspective to be like, but you really didn't win this. Like, you really, this is not something to celebrate. Um, so I'd say that's there.
Yeah, and it ties into other episodes we've done in the past. I was going to say specifically things relating to Miyazaki Studio. There was a video that came out recently. It's a short video, and I'll link it and put it on the list I'll make at the end of this. Pop Culture Detective did a short about how war corrupts all, and it's maybe like 3 minutes long, and it's just about how throughout Miyazaki's output as a director, there's a recurring theme in his work that people think war is, oh, especially, I mean, and we've talked about this before, especially with Americans. Oh, it's something that happens over there. That's not our problem. And if they send back soldiers and they're, mentally or physically, injured or fucked up because of what they saw and did or experienced, that's kind of on them too. Like they just need to figure that out on their own. When you have conflict that happens in your own country, it becomes very, very obvious that it affects everyone. There's no such thing as an innocent bystander. There's no such thing as people who aren't affected unless they're incredibly privileged. And I mean, it doesn't only link to things we've talked about, like Grave of the Fireflies or The Boy and the Heron. It even links back to our previous episode about Casablanca. When you have this happening in your community, in your backyard, you are going to find yourself in positions where war affects how you eat, how you navigate your life. It affects your sleep. It affects like how you're raising your children. And this is something that I think people who survived World War II or even were children during World War II, like Miyazaki was, they understand this. And currently we don't. So we're hearing a lot of rhetoric of people who are excited. I think even more and more, we're all in our own echo chambers. And I mean, the internet figures all of us out. So, I mean, I'm probably in more left leaning circles as far as, what I'm seeing and reading. But there's a lot of excitement. And I could tell it's younger people. They're like, yeah, like let's guillotine everybody. Let's bring back the French Revolution or Che Guevara and stuff like that. And wanting to go out in the streets and kill people, like that's going to solve everything. I think a lot of people when they're young, I think they don't fully understand quite yet how that spins out. And it's like you could get killed too. People could get killed in front of you. They can get there's all sorts of stuff that can happen. It's not like the movies. It's not going to necessarily be something awesome that you imagined in your head. It's absolutely horrible. And this is coming from someone who haven't even experienced war. I haven't been around it, but I know enough to sense that it's not a good idea. And I might be labeled, a complete pussy for saying that, or a bystander, or, you know, something incredibly negative. But um, actually, wait, hold on. There is a quote I came across recently about war. Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay, it was Rebecca Solnit. She's mostly known for the mansplaining essay that she wrote that kind of went viral years ago. But she was interviewed recently and she said, a lot of the left wants social change to look like the French Revolution or Che Guevara. Maybe changing the world is more like caregiving than it is like war. Too many people still expect it to look like war. And after seeing Sanjuro, I mean, all this kind of stuff is in the soup of my brain afterwards, trying to figure out how it connects to being a human now, years later after this was made. And I think that still stands.
There's an interesting phenomenon I was just reading about, and I'm gonna butcher all the terms for this, everyone, so I apologize. But there's a difference between this perception of like daddy politics and mommy politics, where with
Ooh,
mommy
yeah.
politics, it's like very nurturing and very caregiving, and we need to take care of people, and then daddy politics is very like we got to bring the belt down and bring like aggression, and we got to make it suffer, and it should be a negative experience. And right now, I think I was reading that right now, everyone is saying like the social pendulum is swinging towards this need for daddy politics. So like when you see something like war or violence or hardship, for example, people will interpret that as being like, oh, that's good, that's how you make progress. And it's very like a lot of Freudian stuff. I don't know. It's very weird. Like I'd recommend anyone go read that. But I think here you definitely see, even in Sanjuro, much less, everyday life now,
Yeah.
you see where it's like, oh, bloodshed and violence and consequence and death. That is that is justice. That is how we move forward from this, which is very aligned with like daddy politics and the idea of that, where maybe Sanjuro, even though he is a figure who unleashes this bloodshed. And again, I would criticize the feature because I don't think it is vocalizing enough of like him rejecting that ideology, though also at the time, I guess they were just all samurai. That's what samurai do. Um, Maybe he wants a different outlook on like justice and how to achieve what he wants. And that's where some of the intelligence comes in. I would say that both for the film and just for real life, I'd recommend everyone looks into that. I don't subscribe to daddy politics, I'll be honest, but alas.
I don't subscribe to either, but I have heard that before. That seems to be something that is being discussed more. It is very reductive, but I think it's a really simple way of explaining the differences between um, the divide that's currently happening, particularly in America, but it's happening elsewhere. And yeah, with this one, I didn't think about it too much, but it did come to mind a little bit as far as if we're talking in this context, like the Sanjuro character being the daddy, because he comes in and he just takes over everything. And he is, it's kind of, I think both sides are kind of looking for a political figure right now. I mean, it seems that the right has theirs, but there is still this idea in our culture and in our psychology where we very much want to pin our hopes on one guy who will fix everything, someone who we can vote in as president, or someone who can be the head of some sort of civil rights movement or something like that, some sort of Superman. I'm sure that that term has been used tons. Once again, nothing I'm saying is original here, but someone who will just come in and show you what to do. Everything they do is perfect. All their ideas are brilliant. Yes, there's some violence used, but all the violence is justified and everything is going to be the way we want it and we will win out in the end. Maybe that's just not the what we should be looking for anymore. And I am seeing more resistance to those kinds of ideas among certain people I'm talking to, or other people who just are trying to think of some new way to tackle these issues, where it's very much, no, this is not pinned on one person as a leader. It needs to be a collective effort to support ourselves or take care of each other, which is, like you said, falls into mommy politics. But I mean, if you look at daddy politics, I mean, what is that? That's what's causing wars and bloodshed and famine and all sorts of things that are causing us anxiety and grief and despair. So, yeah, maybe watch it. I do sometimes wonder with the films we watch. For example, if we watched it back in 2008, the way we would feel about it would be a lot different than now. I'll just put it that way.
No, I agree. I think that's a pretty clear observation. That's a good observation. My mind when you were talking went in college. I'm not going to explain this entire framework I created, but for one of my classes, it was about American literature, like 1900s to present, and we were talking a lot about like American history and stuff. And I was like, if you look at American history, specifically was my focus, but I'm sure this is everywhere in the world. I found it really interesting how the culture switches between, and there's a lot of like ways you can look at this, but and like terms you can use, but it's interesting to me how society switches between being very masochistic and very like sadistic, where it's very like we will do an event and have social progress be formed through like treating others horribly or doing something horrible, committing war crimes, genocide, racism, whatever it may be. And then we will like have a period where we feel really bad about that. And I was like, really, it's a cycle that continues over and over again. And granted, in this essay, again, long framework, don't need to get fully into it. I was quoting like Diane Arbus and shit, but like I was making a very like psychosexual argument with it. But it's interesting in Sanjuro, just thinking about this main character now, he really does like, I think maybe this is like why I feel like there's a disconnect between me and this character, is because he represents both of these sides, where like he obviously is incredibly talented as a swordsman with unleashing violence. He's very quick in some situations to unleash violence on others. Though he also then has an introspective moment at the end where he like feels bad about it, to where like this character, I feel like if you viewed violence in the way that he does at the end, you would not probably, and granted, like, you know, a lot of character development could explain this. There's a lot of ways. I'm not saying it's totally unnatural or impossible, but it's like a contradiction within the key like heart of this character, where he both will unleash and clearly is trained and clearly thoughtful and clearly brash in ways to where he unleashes his violence, but then he also, because he's a hero, pulls back and feels bad about it. It's very like interesting. Like normally when a main character, a hero, is unleashing great violence, I guess normally it's against a bigger enemy, but like you never have a moment where Luke Skywalker sits and is like, when we blew up the Death Star, we killed a lot of people. We actually murdered like so many people, and so many of them were just like janitors doing their jobs. Like,
Yes, yeah.
that's kind of rough. Like, you never get that moment because when you have both elements, it creates a very like confusing dynamic for the audience. I totally get why. Fair enough. And I'm sure there's also plenty of cases where characters do have both sides. I don't need the comments to tell me that. But I do think with this character, that is maybe one of the reasons is because he's both so like representative of both sides of the coin, and that's just so unnatural. They do try to give some of it to that woman. I absolutely agree that he saves, but it is like it is weird.
Yeah, it's an interesting combo, and I think maybe one of the missing pieces of the picture that's making this harder to understand is what Sanjuro is based on. It's based on a short story. I don't have the author and the name in front of me at the moment. I could look it up, but I'm not going to trouble myself at the moment. I'll see if maybe I can find a link to it. Maybe there's a PDF of an English translation or something, and I'll put it in the little the list I'll make at the end of this. Where maybe if we read the short story and what the original tensions were, maybe we would get more answers than the version we got where they inserted the Yojimbo character into it, because then things needed to be rewritten. Maybe it's if it is more just about sending blossoms down a creek in order to communicate and solve a problem, or it's about uprooting corruption, that sort of thing, that there is a lesson at the end, maybe without the sword fight. um Maybe, yeah, maybe that short story has some wisdom that you and I are looking for, but we're watching an adaptation of it right now where we just think this is very strange. There's too much going on, and there's too much conflict. But at the same time, like we said at the beginning of this, it's enjoyable. You can you can engage with it, and there is a lot of comedy. I think probably a little bit more comedy than usual. I think that's something maybe people don't expect with Kurosawa. There are moments of comedy in a lot of his films, but especially the hostage they take. I just found that so funny. He has no allegiance whatsoever, and he keeps coming out of the little sliding door closet, comes out and says something, and then he ends up becoming friends with everyone. And they don't really address that either. So I don't really know what his character arc is either necessarily, but it's entertaining. I feel weird saying that, where it's just like, this is okay. Like it feels
Yeah.
an hour and a half or something, but you kind of expect more.
Well, and it's weird because, like, again, it vocalizes a deeper conversation. I think we've found some deeper elements rooted in this film that you can digest. It is weird, though, like, with all that said and done, with, I would say, this ultimately being like a, looking down upon the youth who glorify violence. It is weird that it's so fun, right? Like, that feels like a contradiction. I guess I used that at the top of this, so there are so many contradictions within this film. Like, yeah, there really are. I would be fascinated to read that short story. Everyone, round 2 of this on Anatomy of an Adaptation. Stay tuned. I would just be fascinated if there is more to this character to explain. Well, then I guess also, though, we know that some of these character choices was because it made so much money and they wanted it to be more marketable. But I'd be curious if there's more like specific character depth or explanation for this character or backstory for him. Because I do think with like a richer context, a lot of this could be explained and pretty poignant. It isn't explained in the film or shown. So like whatever. Yeah, it is fun. It is weird how fun it is. The comedy for me I thought was very like out of place. There's so much like just people being buffoons in this. It's very like odd, again, with the message, with the violence at the end, with the character, with the perspective. Like, none of that leans towards comedy, but there is so much like almost slapstick comedy at times in this. It's very weird. I will say, you mentioned like, not, this was not your purpose, but you mentioned the like sliding doors here. I thought the production design in this was phenomenal. I love this house that they're in. I love how and this is just, Japanese architecture, to be fair, but like, I love how behind every wall there's someone like listening, and they're like, who's there? And then, they pull it out. There's a really great use of a river here. I thought that was fun. Like, I do think the production design, the flowers were great. I thought that was a strong point.
I
But
no, you're not alone in that. And at one point I wrote down, I know I said like, Mihune can slam a sliding door, and it's just made of like paper and stuff. And I thought, like, how is he doing that? That's so effective. And it's, yeah, there's just little moments, like even the I guess it could be summed up and jokes and stuff like that. The women bring up this idea. It's like, how about instead of burning down the house with the servants inside, you send these flowers down the creek? And his response to that is basically fine, and then he just like slams the door. It's just, yeah, he's so stormy, and there is something kind of funny about him as well, because he's just like the begrudging, like, I have to take care of everything even though like there's no reason for me to be here. And apparently, if I was just had my way, I would be drinking sake and like passing out in public places. uh but yeah, I noticed the sliding doors. I mean, there's just certain things about it's capturing a historical period. It's capturing, the way that people lived in particular houses, that it's just a way that we do not live in the West. So I think we notice that a lot more as well. And I mean, this is just the thing with me, and I'm noticing this over the past year or so. But when Japanese men fight and threaten each other, the way they speak and everything is so much more interesting than when like Westerners do it. Like, it sounds so fucking serious. I'm not going to imitate it. Everyone knows what it sounds like. I do not speak Japanese or any other language than English, but it's just like men circling each other, being like, I'm going to kick the shit out of you. But it's in Japanese, and it just sounds like an epic poem. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
that in this as well, like where it's just like, holy crap, like these people are going to decimate each other with swords. They're not even going to use guns. Like, these are hardcore people.
Yeah. No, it's slow. It's slower, but like it's a held back yell to where it is like they're yelling, but it's not like a scream where they're losing control. It's very like breathy. There's like a rhythm to it all. I like could not agree more. I think that's why I'll watch a lot of. I mean, like, and I think this is a lot in the action films, like the samurai films, but even in other like some dramas and such, where like you will look and you're like, these performances are phenomenal because there's just
Hmm.
such control around these scenes. And maybe again, some of that is just how the dialect and the language and it just naturally is with Japanese performances, fair enough. But like it really is every time I'm kind of like blown away by it. I'm like, oh, this is captivating.
Yeah, it's the way they speak, it's the way they breathe. There's just vocalizations that we don't do. The way we speak is not musical in any way. I think that's something that does exist more in Asia. Like, there is like more of a musicality to how they speak, and so there's a lot more going on with tone. And if it gets threatening, I'm completely transfixed. Or even in monster movies and stuff like that, like in America, we don't have crowds of people just going like, oh, like in unison. There's these crowd scenes and, kaiju movies and stuff where there's just like a bunch of people standing in one place, and they all like make a sound at the same time to express shock or stuff. And we just don't have that. And I enjoy that as a viewer just because it's different and it's communicating in a different way, and I find that just so fascinating. But I mean, we're talking about samurai stuff here, so yeah, I mean, we're talking like the final scene, or just so many other scenes in Kurosawa films, or just samurai scenes in general, really, really good ones, where there's just two men who are threatening each other, and their voices are deep and loud, and they're, yeah, like you said, they're not yelling, but you just know it's going to take like 1 second and someone's going to die, and that's how Sanjuro is. And I did see a very short interview with that actor that he faces off with at the end, and his name is escaping me at the moment. Um, Hanbei. Yeah, so it's Tatsuya Nakadai. Nakadai. Okay, once again, I apologize. But he said that that scene was so scary to film because they did not tell him what Mifune was going to do. That's why they stand there for so long before it happens. And it shows. It's just this really tense scene, and it was apparently really tense for the actor. And then he had to basically like have a huge geyser come out of him and fall down and die. It was probably a really weird day on set. And I have to give, yeah, like some mention of that or some credence to that because it's done well. But once again, I feel like I'm backpedaling here. It's like, well, what is it saying? What is it saying? Oh
Yeah,
man.
it's so weird because there are so many films. Like, I don't want to give the impression that we are like, because I don't think either of us are like prudes or like we look at every film under a microscope. There's actually in what my rapid reviews today, I'll even talk about this, where like there are films that can just be dumb fun and like that is so acceptable and I will
Hmm.
celebrate that tremendously. But it's just like for Kurosawa, you expect more. The film presents more. The film is not like, it's not a dumb fun film. It is actively trying to be more at times, and then goes to being like kind of a logical dumb fun, to where you're like, it really it initializes, I guess, the conversation we're having with these criticisms. I don't want anyone to go and online and be like, oh my gosh, they just didn't have fun with this, and clearly it was just meant to be dumb fun. It's not meant to be dumb fun. It just kind of becomes that, which makes a very like notable, I would say, experience like we're having in this conversation. It prompts it. It's not us. They're prompting it. We're not trying to put this on a film that does not deserve this conversation. um so just to be clear for anyone who's not seen the film, we're not crazy.
No, no. It's there's a mix of both, and one of the things that's never addressed in the film that I found really funny is that they're meeting, in a temple, and they're talking about what they're going to do next, and that's when the Sanjuro character shows up and says, "I was eavesdropping on all of you while I was sleeping in the next room." What? And I think all of you are wrong about this because I somehow psychically know like who is the bad guy and who's the good guy, and everything you're doing is wrong. And at one point, I was thinking to myself, and maybe this is because I'm not the age of these characters anymore, but I was thinking, how do I not know that you're a plant? That you're just some random guy who shows up and is telling us to do everything, but it just happens to work out that he's not. We know that as viewers, but they don't, and they go along with it anyway. So, yeah, they are really stupid in a way. At some point, they do start questioning him, but of course, like that goes off track as well.
Imagine this random guy showing up and being like, get in the floorboards, and you're like, okay, cool.
Seems like a
Like,
trap.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would never imagine. I would never do that in my life, especially because it's like, they think that an ambush is happening. To be like, actually put away all your weapons and get in a vulnerable position, like, I would be like, no, I'm good. But you know what? I'm not a samurai, so maybe this was more normal at the time, but it was weird for
Yeah.
me.
You bring up a really good point. Yeah, it reminds me of other moments in films I've seen where we know the main character, and the main character, like maybe he signals to like a vulnerable girl who's running from a serial killer in the woods, and she doesn't know. He's like, "Here, get in this hole with me," and she'll do it, and it's just like, no, like that's not what I would do at that point. I don't care what this guy looks like. I don't know. I'm not going to get in his car or anything like that. I'm going to keep running because this could be an accomplice. This could be another person who means me harm, but yeah, and this one it's a samurai setup, so it's very much yeah, you should listen to what he says because we know him, we've seen you at Jimbo, but you just met him 5 minutes ago, and you're just doing everything he says, and I don't know, I guess you're lucky.
Yeah.
Gonna get murdered.
So funny. It's so funny when you think about it in that way. Like, yeah, you are. I guess that's just luck. Well,
Yeah,
I
luck.
mean, hey, that's youth. That's the dumbness of youth, which I
Dumb
guess is the
luck.
message in here. Yep.
Literally dumb luck.
um, literally dumb luck. With that, Hillary, I think we're kind of wrapping up here. Is there anything left you want to talk about with Sanjuro?
Okay, so I'm holding up my notes here. I know you can't see me. My camera is off when we when we record these things, so Carson is very, very understanding. I don't think there's anything that's coming up. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything. We did a good job. Good for us, right?
I feel accomplished. I feel like we
Yeah.
took a film and like really squeezed this for everything it had possible. Like, I don't know. I think overall, I have no hate in my heart for Sanjuro. I
No.
don't think it's I don't think it's probably Kurosawa's worst film. There's tons I've not seen, but I'm sure something in there is worse. This is watchable. Does it live up to the promise of what it could be, what it even vocalizes it's going to be? No, I wouldn't say that, but performances were fine, good action. I don't know, it was fine. Kurosawa, probably I would not recommend if anyone's like, oh, I just want to view his brilliance. I would say this is very low on the list of like things to prioritize, but it is fine. I
Mhm.
guess.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
one
know.
that you need to see further down the road like us, where you've seen
Yeah.
other things that he's done so you can understand what he's trying to do. But I think if someone saw this one first, I really would be interested in what their response is. It might be,
Oh.
is it really? Is this guy is brilliant because it's not representing him and what he does very well. So
with that said, there are a lot of people who like give this film 5 stars and are like, this is incredible. It is in the top 500 films on Letterboxd. So like there is love for the movie. So maybe we're
Hmm.
just not seeing it. I would love to have a conversation with one of those people because I don't really see it within this film. I do feel like that's probably, I mean, no shade to anyone. I feel like it's probably people being like, it's Kurosawa, so it's 5 stars. But
Yes,
like,
that's it. That's
fair
what it
enough.
is. I'd guess, and it's kind of like there was a conversation I came across about Bob Dylan yesterday, where people are like, he's brilliant, everything he touches is gold, even if it doesn't make any logical sense. And then people talk about how they go and see him live, and it's always like the worst concert they've ever had. Every single Bob Dylan fan I know who's gone has said that it's a horrible experience, and he doesn't care about his audience, and it's always horrible in a different way. And then they go and see him again because there's that identification with this person is a legend. I like something. Sometimes it can maybe even be one thing they've done, and then they will hang on to that person for decades. And it's like they everything they do 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, even if it's just okay. There's no range. They're just devoted. So that would be my theory. Maybe I'm overstepping my bounds here. Like if you really love Kurosawa, or you just don't want to look like a fool on Letterboxd because other people are looking at what you write, you're just like, it has to be 5 stars because I just don't want to I
Sure.
don't want to look like an idiot. So
Look, I'm not even the hugest fan of this band, but as someone who's been to 3 Modest Mouse concerts and each time been like, this was not worth my time.
no, they were number
So sad.
two. It was like the worst
Oh, was it?
experiences, and Modest Mouse was number two, I think,
That's
or
so
no,
funny.
or was it?
I believe
No, it was someone
it. They're
else.
they're horrible live. Peace and love. But I've seen people be like, they're so good, and I'm like, they're not. They're not that
Well,
great.
you
I
went
promise.
twice, so you
I went three
tried.
times because
You went
I was
three?
like, I am wrong. I was like, I am wrong.
Oh
I must
man.
be mistaken. And then the second time I was like, well, maybe I'm not wrong. But like, then the last time was like, it was the first concert back during COVID, from COVID. And it was outside, and I was like, you know what? It was like $20. Why not? And it was bad again. So I think I'm done
Oh my
giving them
god.
chances. But I wanted them to be good.
Yeah,
But you have to
oh
admit when something's
man.
not good.
Yeah, it'll
Oh
make
boy.
you really unpopular. I have to say, if you talk among the fans, especially online, where they don't see your face, so they feel like they can write anything. But yeah, maybe I'll find the link to that conversation. It was, I think, a Reddit poll, and it was just hilarious how like I just kept scrolling down, and it was Bob Dylan stories, and I thought, shit, I've been hearing this my whole life. I've never gone. I'm not a fan, to be honest,
Yeah.
but it's something I just keep hearing. It's like, why are you going back? This is like an abusive relationship. You need to stop.
You do eventually have to cut it off and be like, we're done.
It's like, yeah,
But
just listen to the records from the 60s. Like, stop doing this to yourself. So
yeah.
that's my advice to Bob Dylan fans out there. Like, you have the music, don't go if he's making you upset, okay? I care about you more than he does.
And on that note, anti Bob Dylan, we will never do a complete unknown episode. Don't even get us started on that film. I think that's going to do it for today's episode of Sanjuro. If you want to watch Sanjuro, widely available on Criterion Channel, as with most of Kurosawa's films, at least a lot of his big ones. So I'd highly recommend that. And I think it's just also out there generally. If you want to watch this film, you can find it pretty easily. With that, let's end this with our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I had like such a weird week of watching films and older films, so I'm gonna get through a lot of them. First, the only new film I'll talk about is Hamlet. Riz Ahmed stars in Hamlet. Hamlet
Mm.
on the big screen is so fascinating to me because you've had both Laurence Olivier and you've had Kenneth Branagh do like pretty definitive, incredible versions. I mean, Kenneth Branagh especially is like, I think, a phenomenal picture. I think it's his masterpiece. So it's always like, what are you going to bring to the story that actually, demands another telling? This one brings a lot of cultural elements to it. Riz Ahmed is fantastic. I think since like it's wild how he continues to work and uplifts these smaller projects. But I actually really appreciated it. I watched Sam Taylor's For Heaven's Sake. This is starring Harold Lloyds. I'm a massive Charlie Chaplin stan. I've always said like there's never been for me a silent comedy or a silent comedian to rival Chaplin. I think this film like kind of surpasses a lot of what Chaplin did. If I had anyone who had never seen a silent comedy and they just wanted something that was like nonstop, genuinely so hilarious, goes just absolutely like 100% at every moment, I would probably show them this over what Chaplin does. Well, Chaplin, I think, probably has a lot more substance than this. This is just like nonstop entertaining. Genuinely, it's like an hour long. Such impeccable timing. Every single joke just escalates further and further. Really kind of obsessed with this. I watched Blood Tea and Red String. This is from 2006. This is a stop motion like adult fairy tale. I just have to say the vibes were impeccable, while the story was like, it's a fairy tale, it's fine. This is pretty dark animation, but it really worked for me. It like hooked me. There's something like hypnotic about this film. I weirdly watched, for reasons I don't need to get into today, I watched Pleasantville for the first time, but I watched it twice back to back. So in like literally one day, I just literally watched it once, watched it again, for reasons. But it's a weird film. It's like good. I think it's very creative. Its core messaging is obviously one that's nice to see. The dynamics of this world are so bizarre to me. I feel like if anyone listening has like a YouTube channel where they kind of like dissect films and really talk about like the power dynamics within films, there are so many strange things here where it's like you enter this world where you know everything about everyone around you, and then you're like forcing them to change even if it's for the better. It was just like bizarre. Not bad, but just bizarre. I watched The Hero. This is 1966. Same director as the Apu trilogy, an Indian film. I love this movie. Even as someone, I say this because I did not love the rest of this guy's work. I know Nicola Grasso especially is like a noted hater of him. It's just about this director who's on a train, and this woman wants to interview him on this train, and they start discussing being a famous film director, having money, the stresses of having like box office to worry about, how that hurts self-expression. If you want to stand politically, for example, you have to think, well, what does that do for my career? I thought this was just brilliant. I thought the directing choices were great. The screenplay was fantastic. I really thought this was like a masterpiece. Highly recommend. Finally, and this is one where, like, on paper, you never in a million years would believe I would be on this side of the conversation and Jakob Flash would be on the other side of the conversation. It feels like it's like should be backwards. I watched Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive, which is a pretty hated film. A comet or like an asteroid or whatever is like near Earth, and it makes all the machines come alive. And there's killer trucks, and it's all to an AC/DC score. Stephen King's only time as a director. He is on cocaine and he is drunk every day at 8 a.m. and he doesn't really know where he is and he doesn't know what he's doing. And what follows is just like absolute chaos on screen. There are so many trucks colliding into each other. It's very violent, but it's like so much fun, where I think so many people are being prudes and are like, this is not as deep as Christine, or this is not as good as Carrie. And it's like, sure, all that's true. Can't argue there. But like, it is literally just trucks exploding into each other as AC/DC plays. And it's like, it is fun. It's a dumb movie. It's a dumb premise, but it clearly understands that it's dumb and leans into it to where I'm like, this is so fun. I am shocked that someone like Jakob would sit there and be like, this is not good. Because I'm like, Jakob, come on, man. Like, out of all the films, this is like where you take a stand against bad movies. Come on. You love Congo. You love when that gorilla talks in Congo. You can't be like Maximum Overdrive is like where we draw the line. And somehow I was on board for this. I don't know, understand it, but I enjoyed the film. So like, I don't know, dumb, but fun. Hillary, what have you seen recently?
I mean, I've got to add some commentary to this. Yeah, first of all, yeah, I am surprised that Jakob doesn't like it, because there are some films that he has fought back on so hard, and I thought, dude, like, what are you fighting for? And it seems like he would, yeah, that he would embrace like how the silliness of this. I have not seen Maximum Overdrive, but I will add to this. There's a great episode. You can watch the podcast on YouTube, Shit Show, or It Was a Shit Show. And they talk about the production for this film and everything that went wrong while they made it. I'll add a link to that to my little list as well. You need to watch this. It's absolutely hilarious. And if Carson, if you want to see like how they made it, they don't like the film, to be clear. That's the spoiler there. They didn't care for it. But how that it was made is just really it's really fascinating. And yeah, some of the things you mentioned, I'll definitely seek out. I haven't watched as much Harold Lloyd stuff, and it's strange. You know, you're a Chaplin fan. I'm totally Keaton. Um, I've been a Keaton fan for a very, very long time. So it's interesting. Yeah, we're. I can't well say like we're on opposite poles, but it's interesting who our guys are.
You've seen
Um,
Speedy and like it, right?
I saw Speedy, but it's like Yojimbo. I saw it a long time ago, and I've seen other
Fair.
stuff of his, and I enjoy Harold Lloyd quite a bit, but he's not my favorite, you
Yeah,
know?
I overall agree. I just that had the New York. I know we both have a thing about New York City on film, and
Yeah.
that film is a great New York film,
Oh
so that's
no.
why I brought it up. But yes,
It's been way too long, so it's one of those things where should go back and revisit. And I think with him, I'm thinking, oh yeah, she's mentioning it. I mean, we're hearing about a film like I that the one you mentioned is one I have not seen, so I do want to check that out. As far as recommendations, let me see, where is my list? Okay, so two things related to Kurosawa. The film I've seen of his the most, that I like the most, is Ran. And I talk about Ran a lot, especially the battle scene. It's one of the most insane battle scenes I've ever seen on film ever. I just, to the point where I've seen it at least three times and I've thought, I don't understand how they did this. And the actors were okay. So I'm recommending Ran. If you have not seen that Kurosawa film, it's absolutely insane. And it is a Shakespeare adaptation. So it kind of links into what you were saying about Hamlet, Shakespeare on screen. Ran is a very interesting adaptation of the King Lear story. The other one is a short film called Butterfly of Love. It's made by a Belgian avant garde filmmaker. And it repurposes footage from Rashomon and turns it into the scariest thing I've ever seen. I saw it in a theater, and there is something that happens in it. I don't want to spoil it, but I think it made my temperature drop like 10 degrees. I was just, yeah, I was totally gobsmacked by this. And you can watch it online anywhere. And then my actual film recommendations, recent things I've seen. I do occasionally watch the Criterion Closet videos, and Christoph Waltz recommended an Ingmar Bergman comedy. I didn't know he made comedies, called The Devil's Eye. Very charming, good at recommendation, very strange, and proof that Bergman can do comedy. Um, the other two, these two are linked together. One is Sound of the Mountain, a Japanese film that came out in 1954 that was recently remade as an American film called A Little Prayer in 2023, just following a family going through something very difficult. And I liked A Little Prayer. I like things about it quite a bit. It's not a perfect film by any degree, but the fact that it is a remake of Sound of the Mountain made it very interesting. And I went back and watched that as well. Last night, I went and saw No Other Choice at a local theater with a friend of mine, and it's so funny. It links to what we were just talking about because it plays at the college cinema that's on campus. So we were there, and we were surrounded by all these college kids, and they were reacting to this film like wildly, like what the fuck? It's like, what the fuck's happening? Oh my god, and just like and having these visceral reactions to it. And don't get me wrong, we were enjoying it very much, but it was very funny at the end. My friend turned to me and he said, I'm realizing that I'm getting to the age where I've just seen so much, and these kids are seeing this kind of violence and Looney Tunes and craziness, and maybe it's their first Park Chan-wook film, like they've never seen that before. They're reacting to it, and to us it's like a Tuesday in a way. We've seen way more. So that was an enjoyable experience. And then lastly, I'm recommending, as far as rapid reviews, I did see The Drama with the same friend the previous weekend, and I'm bringing it up because there are some sort of connections to Sanjuro, where it's like it's both situations where people need to slow down and think about things instead of rushing into fixing stuff or like following their immediate reaction, and things quickly spin out of control. The drama is like that, but on a completely different level. And I have to say, the kind of comedy that it is does not usually work on me, but there were some scenes in this where I was laughing like I hadn't laughed so hard in a really long time, because the situations are so horrible and so bad and so awkward that that's all you can do, and and you just know it's going to get worse and worse and worse, and it does. So in conclusion, those are my rapid reviews. Tried to relate them somewhat to Sanjuro as a little challenge this time. And what can I say, Carson? It's been fun.
Love it. No, thank you so much for joining. I echo completely. Ran is my favorite Kurosawa film. Check it out. I also forgot to mention, I will quickly plug, back in 2020, height of the pandemic, like we're talking like lockdown just started. Clapper launched. I don't know if you were part of Clapper yet, Hillary, or if you participated in this, but spearheaded by Jakob Flash, who we love so much. Check out the Uncut Gems podcast. He launched a series of Kurosawa features where like a bunch of writers for Clapper took a different Kurosawa film, one or two films, and wrote feature essays discussing either their place in Kurosawa's filmography or discussing an interesting angle on the film. I don't believe we had one for Sanjuro, but if anyone is interested, those are all available on Clapper's website, so I would recommend those also. But yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much, Hillary, for joining me. I feel like we really did this episode. Like, I feel very satisfied with this. Let's end this by finding Hillary. Where can we find your work online?
Well, you'll find me in the usual place if you've heard me talk before. The easiest way to find me is on Letterboxd. I'm under the name Degelle, Degelle. And then if you get there, you'll see a picture of my cat, Toby. And underneath that, there is a link to campsite.bio. And if you click on that, it'll take you to a link tree full of things I'm doing. Last month, I did finish that essay about the sissy archetype as queer defiance. That was a lot of fun to write. And then this month, I'm working on creating film loops out of old movies and making mixtapes with music from that era that you can just play on YouTube, and you'll just hear a mixtape with like a looping still of like characters from It Happened One Night and One Way Passage. I think that's what I'm trying this month. So that's what I'm working on. And of course, I mentioned throughout the episode that I compile a little letterbox list. So if you listen to this episode and want to see any like the references to the weird things I talked about, you just have to type in ClapperCast Sanjuro. It should pop up. I'll have all the movies I mentioned and then links to, I don't know, people complaining about Modest Mouse and Bob Dylan if you want to see that yourself. It's always stuff I'm curious about when people talk about things on episodes of podcasts, but I have no idea what they're talking about. So that is my gift to you and my gift to Clapper, because they keep inviting me back and I enjoy doing this. So thank you very much.
I love it. I can't wait. I like love the idea that someone's going to click on the list just unaware of this episode and be like, okay, yeah, that's cool. That's all Bob Dylan. Like,
Yeah, what
how
the
was
fuck
that
were they
relevant to
talking about?
Sanjuro? What the hell? I love that. You can find, obviously, ClapperCast on YouTube if you want our video version with our beautiful faces, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and such if you just want our voices. Don't blame you for that. Especially the weeks where it's just me sitting here. It's like, I don't think you want to look at this. So don't worry if that is what you choose. We have episodes recently. Hillary, we discussed the house that Jack built over on the Patreon. Myself and yet Jack Luke Sharp, we discussed Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. We did our Best Picture Rewind episode recently on Casablanca. Nick Lagrasso and Jakob Flash joined us for that, Hillary. And then coming soon, we have an episode coming for Star Wars Day on Star Wars The Force Awakens. Can't wait for the positive, loving conversation from the loving fan base there. And then on our Patreon next month, we're going to be looking at Claire's Can, excuse me. I don't know, actually. I think that's the wrong title, but whatever that is. The Hong Sang-soo film that takes place at the Cannes Film Festival. Even though we won't be at Cannes physically this year, still making the trip to discuss Hong Sang-soo for the first time on the podcast. So with that, thank you so much for listening and watching and supporting the show, everyone. We will be back next time. Goodbye.